sort of dealing with that early flush and weirdness of a book being out in the world. It came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
So but so far so good. Reviews have been kind, and booksellers are getting behind it. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, great. You're in Melbourne, aren't you, at the moment?
I am in Melbourne, yeah. So I moved here last May. So I've been here sort of going on 18 months now.
Okay, cool. Which part?
Very central. So we're in North Melbourne. So we're just out of the CBD really. So sort of very, very big contrast. We were in a place called Mangawhai in New Zealand, which is just north of Auckland. But big change, but so far so good. So
yeah, we've swapped places. I was in Melbourne for about 15 years. Now I'm in Taranaki. So
yeah, I was going to ask because I saw the Ronald Hugh Morrison thing, and weird connection. My dad grew up in Hawera, so
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, so there's sort of Taranaki connections for us as well.
Yeah, but, I felt like a bit of a horrible interloping Australian when I came in. I just submitted to that one, and then got crickets when I won that. Went to that ceremony. It was like, who the fuck's this guy? It's a bit of a project in maintaining my connections with the literary world. Yeah. Because I've got sort of like superannuated mystery writers here. Yeah. That's about the extent of it. But and it's also just sort of helping, like, I guess it's the project to sort of help Justin's listeners sort of broaden their tastes as well. Nice. Just give them a sense of what's out there.
Cool.
It's becoming increasingly hard to get recommends and all the rest.
Yeah, and the New Zealand publishing thing is a funny one, eh? I mean, like you're saying, the superannuated kind of crime writers, it's a bit of a thing. I mean, I've got another book coming out later in the year about Shane Cotton, who's a painter, very well-known New Zealand painter, and that's being published with Auckland University Press, so I've done books with before, but I mean, the Australian publishing scene is just an entirely different beast, particularly when you're kind of working into the crime fiction space, which is so full
it's massive.
Busy. And massive, so very big change from back home, that's for sure.
Yeah, it must be refreshing for you.
Yeah, well, it's it's partly what brought us over. I mean, we came over for a bunch of reasons, but once when a firm signed the book, I was like, okay, there's potentially an audience in Australasia, and I mean, you know what it's like from here as well, is that Australia can be a platform out, in a way that New Zealand is much more difficult as well, so. The idea of sort of launching it as an Australian/Australasian book kind of really appealed. So that's cool. It's I mean, you know what it's like. Melbourne's actually not the easiest place to be, and there's not a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of money really around the place. But there's more to do and a bit more vibrancy. And the firm's been great because I think they're still behaving like a kind of indie because they've only just been acquired by Simon & Schuster. So it's still relatively kind of intimate in terms of my connection with the team there and
cool.
All that sort of stuff. So they've been a great kind of support in the transition as well, which has been cool. So
awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll ask my first question, but I might weave a bit of this back in later on as well and just I'll bring it. So what was the genesis of Dark Days? Where did that come from? What was the inspiration?
Dying Days.
I'm starting to say Dying Days. I've got it sitting right here too. Sorry.
That's all right.
What's the genesis of Dying Days? What was the inspiration for the story?
So the inspiration sort of started a long time ago, really. I was living in London in the 2000s, and my family background is Dalmatian, or Dali, as we say in New Zealand, which is basically the men who moved to the north of New Zealand from the Dalmatian coast of what's now Croatia. And there was a big migration of them in the late 19th and early 20th century. I'd always been really interested in that. And then basically I became familiar with this event in Trieste at the end of World War II, where the New Zealand army were the advance forces of the British troops, and they'd ended up in this very tense standoff with Tito's Yugoslav partisans over the future of Trieste. And so the genesis for me was this interesting or strange moment where I kind of realized that there would have been people who were essentially cousins on either side of that conflict, second generation Dalmatians in New Zealand whose fathers had left that place, and then there would have been, Dalmatians on the side with Tito. And that seemed to me this kind of unknown or unexplored aspect of that story. But I went back to New Zealand. I tried to kind of work some fiction stuff with that story, and it wasn't quite gelling when I was in London. And then I went back to New Zealand several years, and I actually got a residency at Waikato University for a year as a writer in residence, and it just gave me the space to work on whatever I wanted, really. And so that's when I got the archive box out again. I realized I had all my notes, I had all the books, the weird out of print books that I'd sort of acquired about this event. And I was just able to sit down and really kind of hammer away at a novel set in Trieste. And so yeah, that was really where it came from, I suppose.
Are there any sort of family connections to it as well, or?
Yeah, well, my great uncle Jimmy Orovich, was with the New Zealand forces in the Italian campaign, and he was there right till the end. And there's a sort of weird little moment in the family history where he sent a letter home to his mother, I think, which said that he wasn't able to go to his father's homeland because of the Trieste situation. Because obviously, this tension meant that these New Zealand soldiers couldn't go deeper into Yugoslavia because of the risks of them, not coming back or getting caught on the wrong side of something. So yeah, there was that family connection, but I think ultimately, as I got into the writing of Dying Days and it became more of a kind of genre thriller, that family stuff kind of drifted back into the background as I just became sort of more and more enamored with the events and the place and the possibilities of the story that I could tell.
And so what was that research process like in terms of digging into the archives? And you had a lot of stuff already, but did you, where do you go? Where do you head to find the nitty gritty?
Well, that's what was there. So there are a few things. There's one of the things about being in a university context for a year is that obviously I suddenly had access to university databases and stuff in a way that I don't as a kind of normal civilian. So, everything from, the Times reports from May 1945 from their foreign correspondent, so they've got somebody on the ground who's actually covering the events there. There was that sort of archival material. And there was also, which is part of the public records in the UK now, but there was a confidential report into Yugoslav atrocities in the region, which had been carried out by the Allied forces, and folded into this report or this investigation really was this rumor that several New Zealand soldiers had disappeared along with all the Italians and other people who had disappeared during the Yugoslav occupation. So it was the discovery of that rumor that really drove me towards writing a thriller and sort of go almost like a speculative kind of what if there was some substance to this thing. And so that set me down a track. And then another person who was really important for me was there's a young German historian called René Möller, who I got in touch with, and his expertise, the experience of Trieste's Jewish community under fascism and Nazism. So kind of from 1922 to 45, that's his kind of period of research. And he was amazing because he obviously knew all the ins and outs of what was going on in Trieste. And in particular, the thing that we talked a lot about was the transition from the fascist kind of control of the place to the Italian capitulation to the Nazi occupation of it. And that's when I really understood that it was not just a Nazi occupation, but it was a particular group of Nazis that had been sent down there from the camps in Poland to run the city. So all of that stuff came out of this very kind of rich research moment that I had available to me just because I was sort of sitting on my bum in Waikato University with, all the time in the world to kind of work on this thing, which was obviously a huge privilege. So, yeah.
So you are an art critic by trade?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what I'm sort of known best for, right? So, but yes, so I've done a couple of my previous books are about contemporary New Zealand art, and I've got this book coming out later in the year about Shane Cotton, who's a very important contemporary painter in New Zealand. So yes, that's always been my sort of trade. And then I also, when I was writing for Metro, did kind of investigative pieces and feature writing and stuff like that as well. But yeah.
So that sort of research aspect of it, I guess, sort of transitions you into writing fiction in that sense.
Yeah, in some ways, and the thing I've been saying in interviews and stuff as well is that actually fiction's always been my first love as a reader, and so my art criticism, I think the reason I sort of developed a profile in the way that I did was actually because I was drawing on fiction techniques, travel writing techniques. There was a lot of first person in my writing, you know, so I think I'd always been learning from that end of the kind of literary spectrum, and I'd always wanted to write fiction as well, actually. But, you know, when I went back to New Zealand in 2011, I sort of fell into it because the magazines wanted me to write about art. Auckland University Press asked me to write a book about contemporary New Zealand art, and so, you know, in a relatively small culture, suddenly you become the art guy. And I sort of got locked into being the art guy
yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, art is a very important part of my life, but so is music, so is fiction. So yeah.
Who are your go-to guys in terms of influences in your fiction?
So I think on Dying Days in particular, there are a few people I was thinking about. I mean, like Le Carre is an obvious reference, and a lot of reviewers have kind of picked up on that, and you know that's tremendously flattering to me because I sort of think at the level of the sentence, you know, in terms of spy fiction, Le Carre is just the greatest. But Peter Temple was always a big one for me. You know, there was the Jack Irish books. When I sort of discovered those, I was like, okay, this is my guy. But Javier Marias is a huge one for me, and you know his series of books, Your Face Tomorrow, are actually like weird spy novels. Like the main character is kind of inserted into this strange intelligence network, and really it's a book about sort of memory and shifting identities, and it runs to about 1,500 pages across the 3 volumes, and it's, you know, it's pretty serious literary fiction, but he's always been a big one for me. And there's a lot of plays with names and identities in particular in Dying Days, which is sort of in part, I think, inspired by what he does.
Right.
And the fourth one that's a biggie for me on this is a guy called Jean-Claude Izzo, who wrote a thing called the Marseille trilogy back in the late 90s. And it's this very kind of like hard-boiled noir sort of thing with this Italian French cop. And it has all the kind of classic tropes of the genre, but underlying it is this deep empathy that he has with the sort of newer North African migrant communities who are in the projects and kind of being, you know, beaten up and hassled by the cops all the time. So, but Marseille and Trieste, you know, they've both got these kind of Mediterranean kind of port things going on. So, so yes, those were some of the people I was thinking about when I was working on the book.
I've seen a bit of the promo talking about how it's like a perfect gift for dad on Father's Day.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, like, I have reverted to type because I didn't think I was ever a perfect gift for dad on Father's Day sort of reader. But I found, Dying Days like absolutely compelling and was right into it.
Right.
I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on the commentary around plunging reading rates around men. And how to arrest that, or how you sort of, you know, get stories into the hands of blokes who are sort of reticent to read a book, or might read one sort of, you know, fishing guide or something a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a funny conversation, and it's obviously one that I've sort of been peripherally inserted into because of this conversation about who the book's for, right? And I know there's a bunch of stuff online, and there's debates about, you know, whether boys really aren't reading, and you know, and men as well. But I think for me, like I wrote the book that I wanted to write, and so if the publicity team and the publisher are like, cool, this is a great book for Father's Day, then that's great. But I don't want it to just be a book for dads, you know, like I want it to be wider than that. But I think what I would say, and it's something that I have observed in New Zealand in publishing over the last 10 or 15 years as well, is I think that there has been not a gender congealing, but a congealing around a type of book and a type of literature, which it's kind of tricky because they in a place like New Zealand, you go, oh, well, we've sold 1,000 books, it's kind of gone okay, right?
Yep.
And then what I think's been kind of happening is I think they've been selling 20 books a year to the same 1,000 people rather than finding new audiences for other books.
Yes.
And so I think that, you know, if Dying Days reaches a readership that is only buying you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 books a year, then that's cool. But equally, I want the people who buy 30 or 40 books to dig it as well.
Absolutely.
But I think generally, I mean, I worked as a bookseller in London when I lived there, and
Right.
you know, people read in entirely different ways. And I mean, the online environment and social media is kind of fucking everybody when it comes to reading rates and how they read and how they engage. And
Oh,
you know,
totally.
that pisses me off beyond a gendered thing. I think it's just that aspect that's kind of killing people's brains in the most terrible ways. So
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm grateful for this podcast project because I'm at about 40 for this year at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can still feel my attention span just being absolutely obliterated. This chapter's got 10 pages to go. Fuck.
Yeah.
Can I do it?
Well, and it's also for me, I mean, that's why the comparison, you know, people have been reaching for Le Carre and Graham Greene and stuff in the reviews. And I'm like, oh, you know, that fills my heart with joy because I do walk into the big book chains now and I look at what the fiction wall looks like compared to what the fiction wall looked like when I was working for Daunt Books 20 years ago in London. And I'm like, oh man, like this is being hollowed out in a way that I'm not that happy about, you know. So
walking into like a chain bookstore and seeing the book talk shelf and that sort of stuff, it's pretty, I mean, great that people are reading something, but yeah, like it's pretty dispiriting.
Yeah. And that's been the interesting journey so far with Dying Days, because like actually the big chains have kind of picked up on it, you know, like Paper Plus and Whitcoulls in New Zealand are really going with it, and Dimmicks over here in Australia have got it pretty prominent and stuff. So it's kind of this delicate balance between like, well, it's not a matter of fooling people into the book, but you know, we've got a cover that's kind of like quite thriller adjacent and stuff. But what I hope is that when people actually crack the spine, they go, oh shit, this guy can write, and there's a bit more moodiness and atmosphere and things than your kind of standard kind of spy potboiler that's being chucked around at the moment, you know. So yeah, that's what I hope the reading experience is like of Dying Days anyway.
When the publisher gave it to me, yeah, I mean, I sat, had to put aside my preconceived notions of what I thought, I was getting into with a spy novel. And yeah, you definitely obliterated all of those, the tropes I thought I was going to be sort of walking into. As I said, compelling and, plot wise, leads you all over the place. Great character interactions, and learning things as well.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I'm really pleased that's the response, because that's ideally what I wanted people to have. And it's interesting writing into a genre, because the thing that really helped me is that the spy trope is kind of a container for this book.
Yep.
But actually what I'm most interested in really is lies, and so the spy genre kind of instantly creates a platform where you can explore lies from a plot perspective. And also there were things about Trieste and the lies that were being told and the way that lies were circulating that lent itself to that as well. So in some ways the genre was a kind of a convenient container, but once I was in that container, I really wanted to kind of fuck with things as well, So there are some strange moments when they go out into the mountains, and there's strange performances and all this sort of stuff where I was like, okay, like if the reader's now trusting me to be in this kind of World War II or kind of spy environment, how can I actually stretch them and how can I take them to somewhere that they weren't expecting to go, And that was a very important part for me of the writing.
Mission accomplished. Well done.
Oh, good.
So there are rumblings of a film adaptation. Can you talk about that at all?
No, because I think they're just rumblings, really. Like I think the thing for me that's nice, I mean, because obviously every author's agent and every publisher is always trying to get it in front of production houses and trying to, it doesn't matter what it is. We're all pitching it to TV and film all the time. What has been really nice for me is that the reviewers so far have picked up on the sort of visuality of the book, right? Like there's something, and that was very important to me. I think it does come somewhat from my background in writing about art, that I like people to kind of see what I'm describing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if that lends itself to these conversations around film and TV, then great. But you know, it's such a roll of the dice, that one, in terms of whether it actually comes off, because even if the thing gets optioned, there's no guarantee that it actually turns into something as well, you know. So, you know, for me, the more important thing at the moment is getting on with the next book, making sure that I'm developing a readership and developing an audience who digs the way that I write, and sort of understanding what it is that they're digging as well, you know, that and continuing to work towards that.
I got it. Yeah, I will say, your background as writing about art. I was waiting for a real cliche to land, like bruised storm clouds or something like that.
Yeah.
And you definitely avoided all of those.
Good.
Yeah, I was quite impressed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So I was hanging in there waiting, and I was like, well, he's gotten there, he's done
it. Yeah. Well, and cliches are a really interesting thing, particularly in genre fiction, right? Because, you know, and this is something I was thinking about a lot with the characterizations and stuff too. It's like, you know, again, you've got that container of familiarity that welcomes a certain type of reader in. And so then, like, again, once you're in there, like, how do I just bend it a little bit around the edges so that the characters feel slightly different? You know, I was thinking about the woman characters a lot in this book, and how they simultaneously kind of lent into some of the tropes of genre, but they were able to kind of extend it in a different direction as well. And so always for me, that's the thing around cliche, is that sometimes, you know, you do reach for the cliche when you're drafting stuff, and you go, okay, well, I can either completely dismiss that and delete it, or I can actually try and bend it a little bit so it becomes a little unfamiliar, you know. And that was something I tried to do too. But
absolutely. Yeah. But on the film front, though, do you have any casting wish lists if you get there? Because I this is probably, I mean, take this with a grain of salt, but I realized this morning while I was thinking about what I was going to ask you, that my image of Madigan in my head was actually Rick Mayall from Blackadder.
Wow.
And I'm not sure, but I didn't at the time of reading. I didn't really join the dots. But like, this morning I was like, oh fuck, that's who you're actually visualizing. I'm not sure how I got there, but that's just that's me too. That's my quirks.
Well, I said to because one of the early reviews suggested a couple of actors. You know, they said you could easily see this as a film with this person and this person, and I messaged my publisher about it, and we were having a good chuckle, because I had an actor in my head, or a person in my head, obviously, when I was writing Madigan, but I'm absolutely not going to reveal who that.
Oh, of course not.
Who that was. It wasn't Rick Mayall, but
there's one for you anyway. I thought you might enjoy that.
yeah, totally. But look, I think this is the weird thing. I mean, I've had friends who've had their work adapted for screen, and some of them have been very hands-on in that process, and it's been deeply unpleasant for them, and some of them have been very hands-off, and it's been a much better experience. So, you know, in the end, I'm kind of like, I just want this thing to find its readership, like every other writer as well. I want it to find its readership so that I can have something resembling a sustainable career as a writer, and I can just keep writing these things, you know.
What a concept.
So that's where my thinking's at the moment.
Sure.
I've sort of shifted my thinking quite strongly to the next book or couple of books that I want to work on. And so it's weird. You kind of, you know, it's like when a book comes out, you're sort of half distracted by what's happening.
You're off with the next thing.
You're finished, but you've got to carry on and do something else. So that's sort of where I am. Yeah.
I guess on that note, I feel like, I mean, the book ends at a certain point, but I feel like there are a lot more stories to tell with Alex Madigan.
Yeah.
Is that the intention, or is that something that sort of came afterwards?
No, well, it sort of came. You know, so as I was writing that epilogue, and we'll avoid spoilers, but there's an epilogue that's set much further on from the main action of the book, and yes, at the point that I was writing that, I was kind of like, well, what this kind of creates is the possibility of a sort of universe that's opened up, right? Like almost, you know, almost like a kind of Marvel universe type situation, where you've got a set of characters who are within a particular time frame. Around 45 to 54, this kind of important early Cold War kind of period. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm definitely exploring in terms of like, well, you know, who do I want to revisit? If I do revisit them, what form am I revisiting them in? Where am I revisiting them? Stuff like that. I think that the thing that I'm wrestling with is that, you know, Trieste, the real events of Trieste were such a beautiful container for me to work into. And if I revisit these people, I don't want to do it with flippancy. You know, I want it to have some sort of container that is meaningful.
For sure.
Because one of the things that was really important for me about that particular moment, and as we start to lean into the Cold War, was like, well, what parallels and what resonances can we find with what's happening now? You know, without kind of getting too allegorical and kind of heavy about it, I was kind of like, okay, there are things about what was happening then that I can see happening now, and I want readers to pick up on some of that stuff. So if I can find something like that has a similar resonance and kind of urgency, then I'll be happy, I think.
Yeah, great. Now, I've read that you're a guitarist and you're living in Melbourne too now. So have you got a band together yet, or what are you up to?
You know what? I haven't, but I have a 15-year-old son who I'm greatly encouraging to pursue that line of activity. So whether I get a band together or not, I'll live vicariously through his rock dreams, I think.
I'm sure you can supervise at the Tote or the corner.
Well, well, it's funny because I've started taking, you know, the Tote has those afternoon gigs in the front bar and stuff, which I can take my son to, and we've actually seen some really great bands, and that part of Melbourne actually really excites me. I think the music scene here is pretty incredible, and there's cool stuff to see all the time, you know, and so I'm back into it. It was a huge part of my life for a very long time. And then once we were here, like I've got a bunch of guitars in New Zealand in storage, and my kid was like, "Oh, hey, Dad, I'd like to have another crack at playing." And so, you know, all of a sudden I've got a pedal board and a couple of guitars. And
perfect. So the spare room set up, is it? Or
yeah, well, it's sort of taken over half his bedroom, really. But we're just in a small apartment. But no, he's enjoying it, and I'm enjoying it, and I mean, his real love is sport, you know, like he's a very good young sports person. And so, whereas I was always like, music is king, you know, so to have him kind of start to embrace that is a nice journey as a dad.
I know it's off the beaten path, but like I find through school here that you get a lot of teachers sort of imposing their music taste on the kids in music classes. So you're hearing lots of Creep and lots of Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Like, where are you taking him in with his influences?
Well, you can't escape the Chili Peppers in New Zealand context for some reason.
You cannot.
They're just everywhere.
They need to watch the YouTube videos about Anthony Kiedis and sort it out, because it's really aggravating.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting though, because he has latched onto. I mean, I was a kid of the grunge era, and so he's latched onto some of that stuff, and so he got into things like Dinosaur Jr. really quickly, which was fine by me.
You welcome.
But we had this interesting conversation where I was like, well, like, where are your bands? Like, what are the bands that you want to listen to, and who's kind of coming through? And it was kind of like a really tricky conversation. He was like, actually, the stuff from the 90s I kind of get and I dig and all that kind of stuff. So, but my own background, my uncle was a very well-known music promoter in New Zealand, and he focused very much on blues and kind of blues adjacent stuff. So I grew up like meeting, you know, Buddy Guy and Albert King and like all these guys that my uncle was kind of bringing to New Zealand, but I learned through the blues as well.
Yeah, cool.
And so my boys, I mean, I'm just passing that on, and so, you know, there's some very cool contemporary blues players that I think are doing some great things as well. So
does he know Grace Bowers?
No, no, but check that out. But he's people like Samantha Fish and Gary Clark Jr. and some of these great kind of blues guitarists who are kind of extending things. And I've been thinking about it a lot, but, you know, for me, the blues is a little bit like genre fiction, you know, it's this kind of, it's this container that has its rules and its kind of set forms, but actually within that container, you're able to do heaps of amazing shit. And so there's some sort of parallel there for me, I think, in terms of my interests.
You pulled that back very nicely. Well done. I was going to ask about you being a horror buff too.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that was just being a product of the generation that I am. Yeah. I grew up watching every horror under the sun, and did actually want to work a little bit of that into Dying Days as well, you know. And so there are some moments, particularly around drugs and hallucinations and
Yep.
strangenesses that
Yeah,
start
that's
to
very
happen.
unnerving for sure.
Yeah, good.
Especially being in a region that's pretty well known for its mushrooms.
Yeah.
Certainly a little bit relatable.
Well, well, yeah, it's one of those things where I was kind of writing it and I was like, can I go here? I'm just going to go here and just
Yeah,
kind
just
of
do it. Yeah.
see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, it was flesh crawling. Yeah, a little moment there.
Yeah, yeah, all good. And because again, I was kind of like, how do you mess with the rules of a particular genre? And it's been really interesting because like I read all the greats like Le Carre and Eric Ambler and all these kind of the 20th century spy guys. And I'm trying to read the 21st century spy guys at the moment, but they're so many of them are so contained. They don't push against it at all. So you just get the usual kind of tropes of the sort of the Eton and Oxford educated boys who are kind of having these cunning little adventures in Europe. And I'm just kind of like, well,
Sure.
how do we mess with that? How do we do something different? And so horror became part of that picture for me, for sure.
I think, yeah, also just injecting the Anzacs into that as well, like just that notion of, you don't know a lot about that sort of the historical aspects of it necessarily, even as an Australian or a New Zealander. You get the sort of broad strokes, but then to see sort of the specifics of something like that potentially happened, or weaving a story around it, definitely, is a point of difference there.
Yeah, and it was certainly something I think we were thinking about, as the conversation started to extend with my publisher, because obviously I wrote the first version and it was, it's a New Zealand story because the New Zealanders were there.
Yes.
But I was kind of like, well, there's absolutely no reason that the New Zealanders couldn't have been involved in this level of subterfuge or espionage or whatever. But yeah, as you say, I mean, the trope of it is that it's either just MI6 or just the CIA, and that's how the whole kind of genre is unfolded. And there's this interesting thing that in '49 here in Australia, that was when ASIO, the Australian intelligence service, was established.
Yep.
And so that for me is a very interesting thing too, because it really came out of the Red Scare, like that actually they needed an MI5 style thing to essentially keep an eye on their own population. So it's happened here too.
My great uncle was on their list, so there's a badge.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very interesting. Of them,
actually. Yeah,
well, it's very interesting because so many. I mean, obviously, place like Melbourne post World War II, you get neighborhoods like Carlton, and you get these influxes of Italians and Slovenians and Croatians and everything else out of the displaced peoples camps. And then you get this kind of Red Scare at the same time as well, and that's where the Australian Intelligence Service comes from. So I'm very fascinated by the way all of those things kind of connect back and reach back into those final moments of the war, for sure.
Yeah. And we're totally going back to the Red Scare now as well, as you say, about resonance with history and everything. Like, communism suddenly back on the radar as the biggest threat to our survival.
Yeah, and just I think for me, particularly around these themes around misinformation, young men, I think that one of the things I was thinking about a lot is I was seeing, as I was raising a son, so much cynicism in young men.
Yep.
And I thought back to what had happened in the 30s and 40s, particularly in Germany, obviously, Germany and Austria. And just the way that, cynical young men are the most dangerous things in the world.
Yeah.
And so that was the sort of stuff that I was kind of thinking about in terms of the contemporary resonances. And then, yes, we have got this kind of, this political overlay where, lies, extremisms, all these sorts of things are starting to shape the discourse in a really, unpleasant way at the moment.
It's a good uplifting place to leave it. Yeah. Thank you, Anthony, so much. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Garth, and thanks for your close reading of the book and your interest in covering it. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
No, it's out now, right?
It is out. Yeah, it came out on 28 July in Australasia.
Yep.
It's online as an ebook, and obviously, like everyone else, we hope that it might be available further beyond that in the UK and Europe in the coming year or so.
So the best place to get it from the publisher, or any specific ones you want to go for before Amazon?
I think, support your local bookshop. It seems to be everywhere in Australia and New Zealand. Right. So if you've got a favorite, I'm a former independent bookseller myself. So if you've got a great indie bookstore in your neighborhood, then go and support them because they need it. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Cheers,
Thanks,
mate.
Gar.